Today, we are diving deep into the incredible story of Krishna, a journey that winds through thousands of years of art, faith, and culture. But what if I told you that the god celebrated by millions today is actually a much more recent creation than most of us realize? Well, let's find out.
When you think of Krishna, your mind might first jump to the epic hero of the Mahabharata. You know, the master strategist, the philosopher king, the one whose divine counsel to Arjuna on the battlefield becomes the sacred Bhagavad Gita.
Or maybe you picture someone else entirely, the divine child, Krishna, that mischievous little toddler always stealing butter, but also the brave protector of his village. He's a figure that just pulls at your heartstrings, evoking this sense of pure, unconditional love. And of course, there's the divine lover, the mesmerizing flute player whose music is so enchanting it calls out to the gopis, the cowherding girls, and whose legendary romance with Radha stands as the ultimate symbol of divine passion. A warrior, a child, and a lover. Three incredibly powerful personas all wrapped up in one divine being. But here's the big question. Was it always this way? Were these three distinct streams always flowing in the same river? Well, the real history is way more surprising than you might think.
All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to start by searching for Krishna's earliest, faintest footprints in ancient history. Then we'll see how the different parts of this god were pieced together. We'll pinpoint the exact moment his story just caught fire. And finally, we'll see how all these different faces merged into the one we know and love today.
Our guide on this journey is the scholar J.R. Sarkar, and he makes a pretty bold argument that the Krishna we know is a far more recent phenomenon than we've been led to believe. It's a fascinating concept that historians like to call an invented tradition.
Now, Sarkar's argument here is pretty radical. Let's be clear, he's not saying Krishna himself is a new invention. What he is saying is that Krishna's mass popularity, the vibrant, colorful worship we see in art, in music, in dance, that whole phenomenon is only about 600 years old. Before that, his story was completely different.
So why do we think he's been popular forever? Well, it's because of a mental shortcut Sarkar calls retrospective elongation. It's kind of like when you see a giant, ancient-looking tree and you just assume it's been that huge for all of time. We do the same thing here. We look at the incredibly vibrant worship of Krishna today, and we project that reality way, way back in time, assuming it's always been this popular. But the historical breadcrumbs, they tell a very different story.
Just look at this timeline. It shows Krishna's rise wasn't some sudden explosion. It was an incredibly slow burn. His very first mention, way back around 700 BCE, is as a wise man, not a god. Then for the next 1,000 years, he's barely even a whisper in the texts. Around 500 BCE, a famous grammar text mentions heroes like Arjuna, but Krishna? Nowhere to be found. It literally takes until the Mahabharata is finalized, nearly a millennium after he first appeared, for the warrior god we recognize to finally step into the spotlight.
Okay, so if Krishna wasn't always this single, all-encompassing god, how was he built? Well, the answer is in this amazing process of cultural and religious blending that took centuries to unfold. You see, the story of Krishna was built by weaving together a bunch of different heroic traditions. The name Krishna itself means dark, and it might have acted as a kind of catch-all, a magnet that pulled in the legends of various local heroes. Over time, other deities like Vasudeva were folded into this growing narrative, creating one single, much more powerful figure. This wasn't a one-time event. It was the assimilation of many, many sagas. And this shift wasn't just religious. It was profoundly societal. Indra, he was the big-shot god of the older, nomadic Vedic people. Krishna, on the other hand, became the hero for a new, more settled agricultural society. That famous story of Krishna lifting a whole mountain to shield his village from Indra's stormy wrath. It's so much more than a myth. It's a powerful symbol of this new faith rising up and overcoming the old one. So, we've got the warrior philosopher. But for Krishna to really capture the hearts of millions, he needed another dimension. And that came with the stories of Krishna, the divine child, a persona that brought this immense charm and deep emotional connection to the table. The story of Krishna's miraculous birth, his narrow escape from the clutches of the evil king Kamsa, it's one of the most famous tales ever told. But what's really fascinating is that even the most ancient sacred texts don't tell it the same way. It just goes to show you that these stories were living, breathing, evolving narratives.
The ancient texts themselves show us this evolution in action. For example, in one major text, the Bhagavata Purana, an anonymous voice from the sky warns King Kamsa about his fate. But in another, the Vishnu Purana, it's the famous sage Narada who personally delivers the prophecy. It might seem like a small change, but it's proof that these sacred stories were never set in stone. They were told and retold, with new details being added over time. Okay, we've got the warrior and we have the child. Now, for the third, and maybe the most influential piece of the puzzle, Krishna, the divine lover. And this persona is absolutely inseparable from his beloved Radha. Now get ready for a pretty stunning revelation. Radha, who seems so central to Krishna's identity today, is completely absent from all the early texts like the Mahabharata. She first pops up not in scripture, but in popular folk poetry. It actually takes until the 9th century for even a favorite, unnamed gopi to get a mention. Just let that sink in. For the first 1,500 years of his story, Krishna was without Radha. Her arrival was a late but absolutely revolutionary addition. So we've got these 3 totally distinct personas, the warrior, the child, and the lover, and they've been developing separately for more than 2,000 years. But what caused them to finally fuse together and ignite this massive cultural firestorm? The answer lies in one of the most important religious movements in history. The fuse is finally lit. In the 15th and 16th centuries, everything changes. All of these separate streams of the Krishna story suddenly converge, and his worship just explodes, going from an elite, text-based tradition to a genuine mass movement that sweeps across all of India. This was the Bhakti movement, and it was a complete revolution in faith. It shifted the focus away from complex, formal rituals to passionate, personal devotion. You could worship God as a parent worships a child, as a friend trusts a friend, or as a lover yearns for their beloved. And Krishna, with his 3 distinct personas, was the perfect deity for this new, deeply emotional way of worship. This new wave of devotional fervor kicked off a cultural renaissance. Suddenly, there was this outpouring of ecstatic poetry in everyday languages, celebrating every single aspect of Krishna's life, from the little pranks of the butter thief to the grand passion of the divine lover. Religion wasn't just an ancient Sanskrit anymore, it was in the language of the people. And that passion spilled over into music and dance. Entirely new forms were born to express this intense personal faith. All of a sudden, the stories of Krishna and Radha weren't trapped in old texts. They were being sung and performed in temples and village squares, bringing the divine to life for everybody. This renaissance also just exploded in the visual arts. For the very first time on a mass scale, incredible paintings and sculptures captured Krishna's legends in vibrant color. The image of the blue-skinned god with his flute and his peacock feather became an icon, cementing his place in India's visual soul forever. So let's bring our journey to a close. We've traveled across more than 2 millennia, from a single, brief mention of a wise man, all the way to a subcontinent-wide cultural phenomenon. So what do we see when all the pieces finally click into place? The Krishna who is worshipped around the world today is not a single unchanging figure. He's a brilliant synthesis. He is the warrior philosopher from the ancient epics, the divine child from the Puranas, and the divine lover from folk traditions, all of them fused into one incredibly compelling, multifaceted god. So, if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's this. Myths are not fossils. They aren't these unchanging relics from a long-dead past. They are dynamic, living stories that grow, that adapt, and that are reinterpreted by every generation that cherishes them. And Krishna's story? It's probably one of the greatest examples of this creative evolutionary process in all of human history. And we'll leave you with this final thought. This incredible 2,000-year journey isn't really just about one deity. It forces us to ask a much deeper question. If the stories we hold most sacred can evolve so profoundly over time, what does that reveal about how we construct our own histories, our own beliefs, and our own truths?